You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
We get to talk about history today, and I'm pretty excited about that.
Me too.
Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting The Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Since we're talking about history, maybe we should talk with our friends at Concordia Historical Institute.
That sounds like a great idea.
Joining us today, the Reverend Dr. Daniel Harmelink, Executive Director for Concordia Historical Institute. Good morning, Dr. Harmelink.
Good morning.
And also joining us in studio, Molly Lackey. She's Social Media and Special Projects Assistant for Concordia Historical Institute, and she knows a lot of history. Hi, Molly.
Hi, Andy. No pressure.
No pressure. Last time you were here, I was just like, I enjoyed the story. You shared so many great stories with us, and I just kind of sat back and enjoyed the story. So that's why I think you know a lot of history. That's all.
I mean, she does know a lot of history, let's be honest.
Exactly. She's just being humble. So today we're going to talk about history and archiving or preserving history, which is really, that's really your wheelhouse, right, at Concordia Historical Institute.
Right. So history is not just about telling stories, but it's, especially for us as Christians, it's, okay, where's the historical evidence, And so God gives us touchstones of the Christian faith, and that includes the history of the Lutheran Church in all different parts of the world.
And today, that story is going to take us to India and the India Evangelical Lutheran Church.
To India.
Tell us about what we know about the history of the India Evangelical Lutheran Church in perhaps the elevator speech version, because I know we could go on for several hours about the history of the IELC.
The elevator speech version.
Yes.
So, like a lot of things in the Missouri Synod, the mission work in India was not all planned out. So the leaders of Synod were all excited about beginning international mission work in Japan. So they had a student at Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. Everything was just going right on track. We were going to begin mission work in Japan until in the fourth year of the seminarian's time at the seminary, he started making disparaging remarks about the professors at the seminary, and so the leadership was beginning to question, is this going in the right direction? At the same time, there were confessional, faithful pastors, missionaries in India who were getting more and more flack from their liberal mission societies in Germany as far as the integrity of Scripture. So right at the time that the leadership was saying, maybe not Japan, they received inquiries from missionaries in India saying, getting kicked out of our mission society because we believe that of the integrity of Scripture. Is there any possibility that you would sponsor us? So CFW Walton and others said, great, we'd love to begin that conversation. So they actually came to America. They were interviewed. They were commissioned out of the annual Lutheran Church in St. Peter's. Mm-hmm. And there's a plaque in the narthex commemorating that or memorializing that. And they were sent back to India as Missouri Synod missionaries. And so Nather and Moan, these were the names of the two gentlemen. This begins basically international mission work for the Missouri Synod.
What did that relationship look like then? Because it was a long history of that well, I guess it still is a long history of that relationship between these two church bodies. What has that looked like then over a number of years? Yeah.
So again, mission work in India. I mean, if you want to go by the numbers, India is a very difficult mission field, and either dies of the plague early, only after a few years of doing missionary work, not seeing a lot of fruit. Mm-hmm. But Missouri Synod is to be commended that we reached out to the lowest class of India and brought the gospel to people who really, society told them they were not even human. So this message of Jesus died for you, for even you, as we sing in the hymn, Jesus loves even me. Mm-hmm. And the gospel, expanded like wildfire among these neglected poor class in India. So despite struggles, despite incredibly limited resources for the church, for the Lutheran Church in India, the gospel continues to produce fruit.
For a mission like that, which grows into a whole church body that grows, as you pointed out, grows rather quickly. Just why is it important to maintain historical records, documents? Why is it important to maintain that history as a church grows like that? What can we learn from that? What value is there? Do you want to take a stab at that, Molly? Why keep those records of history? Why is that valuable?
That's a question I've never
body?
thought about before. Yeah, great.
Well, I think it really... Christianity isn't a religion that just sort of pops out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. I think something that's so important for us as Christians in comparison with a lot of other world religions in general, right, is that it isn't just a story. It isn't just a myth. It's something that is historically verifiable, right? We have more evidence for the existence of Jesus Christ than we do for some of the authorship of, the great Greek epic poetry, which is kind of insane to think about. And I think that the importance of establishing that historical veracity and lineage is really important for church bodies too. The Missouri Synod doesn't just come about in a vacuum. It doesn't just spring forth fully formed from the head of CFW Walther, right? There's
an image for you.
And I think the same thing is true with our Lutheran friends in India. And by preserving this history, they can see, a lot of the things that I think are still difficulties in this mission field have always been difficulties in this mission field. And there have been ways of addressing those issues and overcoming those issues that have been helpful, that they can continue to learn from. And it just provides this sense, too, of kind of the communion of all the saints. I know one of the things that Dr. Harmelink talked about in the article in Engage is while they were going through the archives at the seminary in Nagercoil, they started finding baptismal register records, right? So the names and dates of when people were baptized. And some of these were, important church figures or family members. And there's something really incredibly moving about finding that kind of a record and understanding that, we're not alone, and having that very sort of tactile kind of historical experience that we also get to experience right in the Lord's Supper when we're bound to this communion of saints, and now I have like the thing in my hand that tells me some of those saints' names. Mm.
Yeah. You mentioned the archives and going through them. So you were actually in India, Dr. Harmelink, and there was the cyclone that happened in 2017 that damaged some of these archives?
So this was a Oki cyclone that went through and just devastated the campus. So over 100 trees were knocked down. All of the buildings suffered damage. Mm-hmm. And obviously the seminary was at the point where it's like we can't even have students on campus. It's just completely ruined. So not only the history, but just the life of that seminary was in jeopardy. So you kind of wonder, it's like, okay, in the midst of all of that human tragedy, why are we focusing on just old, dusty records? And I think, again, when Andy talks about, the church growing quickly, I think that's a great thing. But one of the dangers is who's in charge of the institutional memory of that church body or that congregation or that faith community, whatever. That quickly is not honored or treasured. And so now you've got a bunch of new converts that don't know their history. They don't know their family. So I think it's, great. Christ enlarges the church, but that means a treasuring of the saints that have gone before. So as Molly said, at the communion rail, we, with angels and archangels and all the company of heaven, this is another way that we have a touchstone with the saints that have gone before and actually learn not only our history, our traditions, but through that where Christ is directing us now.
So the India Evangelical Lutheran Church has its own seminary. Concordia Theological Seminary in Nagercoil the seminary was also the place where historical documents were housed. It was impacted by a great cyclone, and so it impacted obviously the day-to-day operations of the seminary, as you pointed that cyclone in 2017. And that's going to bring us up to where LCMS disaster response comes into play, and Concordia Historical Institute as a part of that response as well. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
At Concordia University, Wisconsin, we believe you were created for a reason: to use your God-given gifts to help others, to live a life of self-sacrifice in a me-first world, to live a life that's uncommon. Whether you're taking one of 50-plus online programs or learning with us in person on the shores of Lake Michigan, you'll be equipped to make an uncommon impact. Learn more at cuw.edu. Concordia University, Wisconsin. Live uncommon.
Welcome back to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
Today we are chatting with our friends from Concordia Historical Institute, learning about the history of the India Evangelical Lutheran Church and the records of that history as an important part of this church body. And you can learn more about this story in the spring issue of Lutherans Engage. You can find that at engage.lcms.org. You can find this article in there. Great article from our friends in LCMS Communications, Lutherans Engage. Dr. Harmelink, we were talking a little bit about the history, the more recent history of the India Evangelical Lutheran Church having a seminary in Nagercoil and the historical documents maintained at that seminary, and the cyclone that affected the operations of the seminary in 2017. And LCMS disaster response came in to partner with India Evangelical Lutheran Church and Concordia Theological Seminary there in Nagercoil to learn more about what their needs were and help with responding to that disaster. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Ross Johnson, Director of Disaster Response, invited you to come along as part of that team, knowing that their historical records had all been affected by this cyclone. Tell us about your visit there and what you saw in your first visit there.
It was a mess. You're kind of prepared for it, but you're not prepared for it. So it was not only the archives, but the library was damaged. I mean, there were some of the roofs were gone. So you've got this kind of, okay, what are we going to do in the short term just to get things so that they can function as a campus? But more long term, okay, how can we use this as an opportunity to reclaim these historic treasures that were on campus? So it's kind of okay, what do we do in the next 30 minutes and what do we do in the next several years? So, yeah, the first 2 weeks there were basically, we need a plan. And by God's grace, how can we not only preserve, but how can we use these in a new and exciting way to inform the church where she's been and again where Christ is sending her.
What did that archival process look like? You're in the middle of a place that's just gone through a disaster. What does that actually look like to be able to preserve stuff?
Yeah, so you're asking, where in the heck do you even begin? So we got a small group of students that were on campus, and we just set up tables in the courtyard and started hauling out this material that was water damaged. Some of it was moldy. And the big thing is some of this had already begun to be eaten by ants.
Ooh.
So the ants in around Nagercoil, they're huge. You can put a saddle on them. They're huge. And they love paper.
That's a problem.
So it was, how do we clean these up and stabilize that condition? So that's kind of it's like disaster response kind of stuff. So we began it was a triage process of, okay, this has mold on it. We have to isolate that, right? This is dirty. It needs to be cleaned. Get the ants off of that one. And we started putting things in protective sleeves, archive quality sleeves, putting it in folders and just finding a room. So they began the process of we need a room that's stable, that's not exposed to the elements, that some of the environmental factors can be regulated, and we're going to start putting the archives there. I had also brought a digital camera, a copy stand, lights, laptop computer, hard drives, all of that to start digitizing that. But that is an incredible process. People come to CHI all the time and they say, oh, by the way, you've probably digitized everything at CHI. And it's like, no way. How are you going to digitize 3 million documents? And I'd say, even if you could do that in a weekend, okay, all of it's digitized today. Well, how are you going to find what you're looking for, right? So it's both digitizing and organizational management it's a huge problem. And so the seminary people, we needed local support, and these people are reeling from the reality that, their whole life has been changed by this typhoon.
And this process of recovering the archives and restoring them and digitizing them as well, where does this fit in the timeline of other disaster response operations happening on campus at Concordia Theological Seminary?
Yeah, so it's all at the same time. And Ross Johnson, God bless him for all the hard work that he and his team do. I didn't want to put extra burdens on him. So it was good that I was there, and I'm just going to focus on the archives. You guys, they also had to come up with a plan as far as how do we basically reconstruct the whole seminary campus. So it was exciting, and by getting in a prayerful posture, it was, except by the grace of God, it's crazy to even dream that this will be all rebuilt.
What was it like for the students that were working with you in that archive process to go through the archives of their church body?
Molly mentioned this almost immediately had a connection with students who I remember one student came in, you're right, and these baptismal records. It's like, this is my great-grandfather that's being baptized in this ledger. And so, it was kind of a tearful family reunion when people rediscover these documents had been on the campus for decades, but they didn't know it. So my whole thing is, historical records, shame on us if we put them in a time capsule and bury them in the backyard. The parable of the talents teaches us that they need to be responsibly used in service of the gospel. If we just, freeze dry them and put them in the freezer, then shame on us, right? So the thing was not only how do we preserve these, how do we preserve them when mold and rain and ants and insects are, attacking them, but what's a God-pleasing use for these things?
So I know some of this created some collaboration then with exhibits and things about India Evangelical Lutheran Church.
Yeah, so we ended up after, as kind of connected with all of this, putting together a big exhibit on the history of Synod mission work in India. And that exhibit has come and gone. It opened up back in August of 2019 and ran through February of 2021. So unfortunately, that was a period of time that a lot of people maybe weren't able to come by CHI because of COVID and everything. But what's great is we have the really, really good exhibit catalog is still available. And also we generated a ton of resources out of that exhibit that are all free and easy to download on our website. So we did kind of something very similar to what we put together for the big 2017 Reformation 500, where we have all of these profiles of different missionary workers in India, starting actually sort of pre-Missouri Synod with a German missionary named Ziegenbalg, who really kind of kicked off the really rich history of Lutheranism in India, and then going through the 20th century. And what's great, too, is not only are these available in English for us, but also they've been translated into a couple of languages that are actually spoken in the Tamil Nadu region of India. So they're able to use them in their churches to help share with their congregations about their institutional history, which is really, really great.
Which brings us back to that question earlier: why is it important for us to maintain history in a church body? What an encouragement to the saints of those congregations today to see their history and how God has provided for them.
Yeah.
How God has been full to them and cared for them throughout these many years. Why not, when this disaster happened, why not just bring all those archives back to St. Louis and do all the work that this is CHI's wheelhouse. This is what you do is take care of archives. Why not just pack them up and bring them to St. Louis?
Yeah, that would have been the easy way. And I had to argue even with the church body leaders that as we said, it's Missouri Synod history, but it's also the IELC history. Ultimately, it's Christ's history. So the people in India need to treasure these things. They need to, own them. And so my prayer is that even though we're doing the harder work of digitizing them, organizing them, all in India with very limited resources, I think this is the God-pleasing way to do it. Yeah, for CHI just to come in after any disaster and just say, okay, well, we'll take them. Thank you very much. May not be the God-pleasing thing. So, for example, if a congregation's going through difficulty, if a congregation, God forbid, is devastated by fire or a natural disaster, our first inclination may be come in there, get the good stuff, and park it in St. Louis for the rest of its permanent home in St. Louis. But I think, again, that robs individual local communities of rediscovering their history. And I think that's a sad thing.
What's the state of this project now? Because the cyclone went through in 2017. The exhibit was in 2019. Now we're 2023. What's happening with this project now?
LCMS response. I don't want to speak for Ross Johnson and that department, but they continue to look for ways to enhance the campus even now. Mm-hmm. And so same thing with the archives is we have pairs of students who are continuing to go through the archives, make sure that they're not deteriorating, digitizing them. And then again, there's different languages involved. There's English, there's German, there's Tamil, there's Malayalam. So these groups of students need to at least figure out, okay, what is this document, what it's all about in all of these different languages. So it's kind of like, how do you eat an elephant, a bite at a time. But this will probably continue for years and years. Mm. And I think kind of CHI's role is to continue to be a source of encouragement. If they have questions, technical questions, we can be there. But this is going to be a process, processing decades and decades and decades of skill. And then again, asking the question, how can we use what's been digitized, what's been stabilized? How can we use this to enhance the faith and the life of the local church in India?
Molly, how can we stay informed on what's going on with Concordia Historical Institute and what the current projects are and get updates?
Probably the best way would be if you're on Facebook to go ahead and give us a like. Concordia Historical Institute, we post about, I'd say at least once every weekday, and we do a lot of stuff highlighting their previous things because we've created these resources and we want to make them available and still for people. So we've got all of this stuff still up and we post about it pretty regularly. And then also we do highlights on Today in History, feast days, and church commemoration. We're currently actually working on a lot of other projects involving foreign missions. We're working on some stuff with starting to digitize and organize photos relating to LCMS missionary activity in Japan after World War II, which is super fascinating. And so that's a great way to kind of keep up on all that is on our Facebook page. We also are online at concordiahistoricalinstitute.org. You can sign up for a number of newsletters on there, and we post regularly about upcoming events and all kinds of fun stuff. So on Saturday, April 15th, we're going to be hosting our spring gala, which will be a super fun day. We're going to have some activities. We're going to be opening our new exhibit on the Japanese Christian block printer, Sadao Watanabe, We're going to be doing behind-the-scenes tours in the archives. Fun, family-friendly. There'll be snacks even. So that's 2 to 4 on Saturday, April 15th. This is a ticketed event, and so tickets are $25 each or $50 flat for a family. There's also a seminarian discount available. And you can buy tickets at the door or online at concordiahistoricalinstitute.org/gala.
Very good. Molly Lackey, Social Media and Special Projects Assistant for Concordia Historical Institute. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Andy and Sarah.
And the Reverend Dr. Daniel Harmelink, Executive Director for Concordia Historical Institute. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's always a pleasure.
You've been listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@kfuo.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.